Hello everyone, Eric Chappelle, Civil Community Evangelist for Autodesk, and I want to welcome you all today to today's webcast, What's New in InfraWorks and Civil 3D. Really excited to have Dan Philbrick, Dave Simeone, and Sarah Cunningham with us today. They're going to be giving you all the details about what's new in the products. And but before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about our webcast series and some other things. This is actually something, if you're new to our series, something that we do try to do twice a month, first and third Wednesdays of the month if we stay on schedule. And the goals of this webcast series are to keep you informed about what's going on with our civil products, and to do it from the perspective of our product team. And today is a beautiful example of that because we've got folks who manage the products on the product team. It's a chance for you to maybe ask some questions and provide some feedback, and I'll be giving you some details on how to do that in just a minute or two. And generally speaking, we want to bring the users of our products a little bit closer together with the folks who are making it. So that's the goal behind the webcast series, and we hope that you'll join others of this series in the future. And speaking of that, our next webcast is going to be on May 3rd, and during that webcast we're going to be, the topic is Electric Utility Story. John Rodriguez, who sometimes we have guest presenters who are not from the product team, and John is an example of that. He's going to be talking about some successes with InfraWorks in the electric utilities industry. So we're really excited to hear about some of the things that John has been seeing in that part of the industry. So mark your calendars for that, May 3rd, same time, and you'll be seeing information come out about that webcast at some of the locations listed below. And also, if you're attending this webcast, you'll get on our email list, and we'll be emailing you the details on how to register for that webcast. We'd like to know any ideas for topics that you want to see. You have a questions pane or panel in your GoToWebinar interface. So if you don't mind, if you have any ideas about topics you'd like to see us present on in future webcasts, just go ahead and type them into that panel. I'm actually going to open that panel for myself so I can see what's going on in the background. So please share any ideas you have with us as far as future webcast topics. I've got a few polls that I want to throw at you and get some feedback from you. The first is, if you're a user of InfraWorks, what is your current usage level with the product? And you'll see the choices range from I don't even have it installed up until I use it on almost every project, couldn't live without it. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know where you're at in your usage level, we'd greatly appreciate that. So far, about 50% of you have voted, so I'm going to leave the poll open for a few more seconds. And just to share some of the results with you, right now the winning choice is I've installed it and played with it a few times. So 32% of you have indicated that response. 25% I've dabbled in it on a few projects. 23% I don't even have it installed. That's actually really exciting that we've got some folks out there who haven't tried it out yet. So I think you're going to be pretty excited about some of what you see today. I'm going to close that poll and open another one. For those of you who do use InfraWorks, we want to know, what are you using it for? What types of projects are you using it for? And the choices are site design, road design, GIS data compilation and early project planning, residential, and visualizing projects. So you can choose more than one of these. Feel free to choose as many as apply to you. And so far, only about 40% of you have voted, so I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds. So far, the winner is visualizing projects with 62%. Close behind is road design, 55%, 52% site design, 44% GIS data compilation, etc., and only 15% residential design. So thanks for your responses to that poll. One more to go. For those of you who are familiar with InfraWorks and are looking to implement it maybe company-wide in your company or organization, what are some things that maybe are obstacles to that level of adoption? Choices are the cost of the software, lacking product functionality, clarity on how to incorporate it into your workflows, you already have what you need with Civil 3D, or training and implementation costs. So again, this is a one choice only question, so if you would pick the one that applies the best to you, we'd appreciate it. So far, about half of you have voted. So we'll leave that open for a few seconds. Right now, the winner is unclear how to incorporate it into workflows at 41%. 23% said that Civil 3D already does what they need. 14% says lacking product functionality. 13% training and implementation costs, and 9% cost of software. So I'm going to go ahead and close those polls. Really appreciate the feedback that you've provided with those polls. I want to tell you about our civil engineering community. Currently, you'll find that at the URL listed there, autodesk.com/InfraWorks360 community. And this is a centralized hub for lots of different useful, helpful, insightful information. The user forum where users of the products, Civil 3D and InfraWorks, can be found here. If you've got questions, if you're looking for information, you're stuck with a certain part of the product, you can get help there from other users and also from Autodesk folks. The idea station, where if you've got ideas with as far as how to improve the software, you can post your ideas there and generate community support, get people to vote for your ideas. And then lots of other stuff. We've got the gallery where our customers have posted the projects that they're working on, and lots of video content, especially the recordings of this webcast series. With this webcast, we've been doing this for 2 straight years, just about every month, twice a month for 2 straight years. We've got quite a library of videos up there, and you'll find them, you'll find access to them on this community site. So definitely check it out for all kinds of good information with our civil infrastructure products. I don't believe this disclaimer applies today, but if we do happen to go down the path of talking about preview features or labs features or things that we're just generally working on, just take this disclaimer into account. Basically what this says is there's no guarantee that anything that we talk about in a preview or labs version of the product is ever going to be available until you actually see it in a fully supported version of the product. So don't make any purchasing decisions based on future-looking stuff. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dan Philbrick. It's all you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I just want to take a minute and just welcome everyone to the webinar. My name is Dan Philbrick. I'm the Director of the Product Development for the Civil products, so InfraWorks and Civil 3D. And so I want to really welcome everyone to the webinar. This is our favorite time of the year where we get to release our latest products, and we're really excited about the versions of InfraWorks and Civil 3D that you're about to see. I'm right now sitting in the Boston office. We have a new office in Boston, so we have folks that are working out of our Boston office. I also work out of Manchester. So Dave is north today, and the Manchester area is working from home, but he's out of the Manchester office, team working in Manchester as well. And with me in Manchester, in Boston, is Sarah Cunningham. Sarah is the product manager for InfraWorks. For those who have followed our product development over the years, Dave and I used to do a Dave and Dan show when we would launch products, and so we've definitely upgraded our presentations here by bringing Sarah in, so definitely welcoming Sarah to the webcast. So really excited about the releases. Just a little bit of retrospective. Last year, great year for Civil 3D. We're seeing, we track usage and how people are using the products and seeing really strong adoption of Civil 3D in all segments and in all parts of the world. So really, really strong year for Civil 3D. Dave's going to touch on that. And then InfraWorks, again, really taking off as the tool for doing that preliminary design, preliminary decisions, much of what you reflected in that poll that Eric just had there. And so we're really seeing that taking off in terms of this past year. So this year, where we're really focusing is a couple simple things. We want to continue to drive more detailed design within InfraWorks, so that preliminary engineering and then detailed design in InfraWorks, and you're going to see that from what Sarah's going to show, really becoming our platform for what we call BIM for infrastructure. And then with Civil 3D, detailed production level work, just really making you successful in that detailed design process around Civil 3D. I think you're going to really like what you see with Civil 3D. And then also, I just want to say that it's not InfraWorks or Civil 3D. It's really about InfraWorks and Civil 3D. And so we're really working on those workflows, connecting InfraWorks to Civil 3D, really making sure that you're productive using InfraWorks and Civil 3D in a design process. So with the release of collections, if you are subscribing to collections, you have both products. So what we're really focusing on is how you're successful using both of those products. And then also Revit. We also, in the division that we're in, we work very closely with the Revit team. So that's another area that we're focusing on. So with that as an introduction, again, I want to welcome everyone to the webcast. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to start walking us through everything that's new in InfraWorks. So,
perfect.
Sarah.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cunningham. Like Dan said, we're in the Boston office today. I reserved the most glamorous conference room for today's webcast. And I'm going to walk you through some of the things related to the latest release of InfraWorks 2018.0. I'll get maybe the most insignificant but most noticeable thing out of the way first. We changed the name of the product. We used to call it InfraWorks 360, and we took out the 360. There's really no hidden message in taking out the 360. We just decided to shorten the name. Most of us call it InfraWorks anyway, so it kind of makes sense. So we'll be referring to it as InfraWorks 2018.0 from here on out. So the first thing I wanted to do before I started talking about new features and the product roadmap is to build a little bit on some of the things that were reflected in the polls in terms of how people are using InfraWorks. So Eric pointed out some stuff related to the civil community where you can see the different kinds of projects people are working on. A lot of them were done in InfraWorks, or InfraWorks was used for a lot of those projects. I've spent a lot of time over the last year talking to customers about what they're doing with InfraWorks and how they're using it. One of the groups I talked to is the InfraWorks Customer Council. We have a group of about a dozen customers represented by the firms that you see here, and they're kind enough to meet with us once a month. And I say they're kind enough to meet with us once a month because they tell us a lot about the challenges they have when it comes to implementing new software like InfraWorks. They talk about the successes they have using InfraWorks on a lot of projects. I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing that they do is they bounce ideas off of one another. So I think one of the things in the poll that came out is that many people, aren't sure how to implement InfraWorks yet. And that confirms kind of what I thought. Not everyone knows what to do with it right away, but one of the things that this group has been able to do is bounce ideas off of one another, talk about what they're doing and how they're using InfraWorks. And one of the things they tell us that the benefit of the Customer Council is having that ability to bounce ideas off of other companies in kind of a casual environment, just so they can figure out what they want to do or what they want to bring to their own organization. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out. There are a lot of examples on the community about how people are using InfraWorks, but at a couple of recent meetings of the Customer Council, I'm starting to hear some interesting things. One is that InfraWorks continues to be used for transportation design or road and highway design. That was kind of confirmed with the poll. And the other thing that we're hearing is that CAD managers at these firms are hearing from their designers that they want to get more engineering data out of an InfraWorks model. More engineering data might be quantities, it might be the ability to see whether or not your road geometry is correct or aligned with the standards. It might be more data in the form of analysis, like doing a sightline analysis or a mobility simulation with the model. And this is something that they've seen increasing in frequency over the last year. So they want to use InfraWorks for visualization, but they also know that it needs to be more, or they want it to be more than just a pretty picture. They want to be able to do engineering design, whether that's analysis or geometric design with it, and they're starting to use it for that purpose on some projects. So I think the polls confirmed. I took a quick look at the gallery this morning before the webcast just to see what was there. And I think the breakdown of projects on the gallery, not that I did an analysis, but my quick look at it is aligned with what we saw in the polls. Quite a few people are using InfraWorks for transportation projects like bridge replacement proposals or visualizing an interchange, which you see in the lower right corner. And there's also quite a few site design projects in here. So, you know, new office buildings and new universities, new schools, you'll see a lot of those reflected here too. I wanted to point out this project in particular. So this is a corridor planning project, and it's in Norway. You might recognize this if you were lucky enough to be at AU. This was the winner of the Infrastructure Excellence Awards, the 2016 winner. The reason I point this one out is not because anyone's done any detailed transportation engineering design yet for this project. This particular project was really about planning a corridor, transportation planning, and visualization of some data. We've seen a lot of projects like this, particularly coming out of the Nordics, Sweden, Norway, Finland, that area, as well as other parts of the world, not just there. And we've heard a lot over the last year about how we're seeing InfraWorks used for these large-scale planning projects. And now what we're seeing are those same companies coming back to us, asking us how they can use InfraWorks for more of the preliminary design now that the planning phase is done. So one of the things that we're looking forward to doing over the next year is seeing how we can exercise some of the design capabilities and the modeling capabilities that are in InfraWorks to support the design of these projects well past the planning phase. I also wanted to show this one because it's pretty impressive looking. It's a good visualization too. So let's get into the new release. So it's a little bit about what customers are doing with InfraWorks. We're seeing it used more and more to make engineering design decisions. And you'll see that trend reflected in a lot of the things that have been released this past month. We wanted to support a lot of the workflows that are related to engineering design. I always like to show a release timeline just so you can maybe see where we were this time last year compared to this year. We had 3 releases in 2017. The last one was about this time last year. And we were talking a lot about road and highway design. We talked about mobility simulation. We talked about tools for modeling interchanges. We talked a lot about roundabouts. This year, I would say we're still talking about roadway design for sure, but we're also talking about bridge design, and that might be one of the key highlights of this particular release. But in addition to bridge design, we've also done a lot to build in more data to the road models that you can create in InfraWorks, so you can get more information out of the model, like road material quantities, notifications from the model when the road geometry violates a design rule. We've also done a couple of other things that I'll go through shortly. So I'm going to start with bridge modeling. For those of you that were familiar with Project Chameleon, that was on Labs, that particular project eventually made its way into a couple of things, one of them being this feature. And what it turned into is the ability to model parametric bridge components like a pier, as shown in this example, directly in InfraWorks. And I have a video that the team put together that shows how it works. So the first step is creating a custom part using Inventor. You can use Inventor Professional or Inventor LT for this part of the process, and you can build any part you want with any kind of parametric relationships that you want. There's really no special rules or restrictions here. So you can build a pier, a girder, and abutment. In this case, we're looking at a pier, however you might like. And when you have it the way you want, you can export that template to a file that will eventually come into InfraWorks so that you can use it to model a custom pier. Definitely different than, say, Part Builder, if you're familiar with using that for drainage components in Civil 3D. So this part of the process shows how you get that pier into InfraWorks. So much like any other piece of content, whether it's a style or a 3D model, you can bring it on, you can import it into InfraWorks through the style palette. And what's happening here is you can organize those things however you like. We're creating a new folder, and we're going to go ahead and bring in that pier. It's a custom pier, that was the name of it. You get the 3D preview of that pier in the window, and then you can apply it to the model. So in this case, they're going to select one of the piers that's already on that existing bridge, and they're going to show you how they go through the process of replacing the selected pier with the one that they created in Inventor and brought into InfraWorks. The workflow doesn't stop there. So you have your custom pier. So now you can do a couple of other things. You can edit the dimensions of that pier through the stack if you wanted to. You could go ahead and create a copy of that pier and change the dimensions and save it, so you have different modifications of that initial piece of content available in your InfraWorks model. So in this case, they're going to create a second custom pier that's the same shape as the first one, but they're going to change some of the dimensions, I think, to make it a little bit narrower and to make the legs of the pier a little bit more vertical. And you can save this. So it's kind of like the idea of having different parts in Civil 3D where you can have the same part but just variations on that part by changing a couple of dimensions. The difference here is that they're available in InfraWorks and they're shown on the style palette. And that's where they show up on the style palette. The other thing you can do is change how the parameters are displayed in InfraWorks. So you have a lot of control over, right now what they're doing is changing the way the parameters are grouped and displayed in the stack. The stack is the vertical panel that you see on the right for that selected pier. And what's going to happen is they're going to change a couple of group names so that they can put groups of parameters together, probably to make it easier to navigate or make the changes that you want. You can customize the tooltips. So if you have a parameter, say, height, and you want to explain exactly what that height is, you can use a tooltip to do that, and you can customize it to be whatever you want. This case runs through the grouping and the customization pretty quickly, but that can be whatever you want it to be. There's really no restrictions on how you group or how you label or how you describe things through tooltips. This is showing a workflow that was released in the past release, which is applying to the next selection. So you can apply that one edit you made to all of the other piers. And then you can export those things. If you want to use them in another InfraWorks model for another project, you can export those things to a separate file. And you can go through those steps again. You can import it into a new model, modify it if you want to, and reuse it for the design. Eric, I'll stop here and see if there are any specific questions about the bridge design capability before I keep going.
I'm scanning the questions now, Sarah. It says, can I use Revit to create parametric InfraWorks components?
That's a really good question. You can send the bridge model to Revit where you can continue the design, you can add rebar, and you can do the documentation. No, and not at this point for creating the parts, though.
There's actually one question that I can answer. Somebody asked if a video showing this custom bridge component capability is available somewhere, and yes it is. If you visit the YouTube channel for InfraWorks, you'll find that video up there, so you can check that one out, and there's other individual videos about the different features as well.
Yeah, and I know the team that worked on this functionality, they've created a number of other videos that they'll use as the basis for help at some point. Not sure what the roadmap is for releasing it, but they do know that having videos that show that whole workflow and the potential of what you can create is important, so they're working on that too.
And someone commented that the UI customization is awesome in all caps, so some kudos there.
Oh, yeah.
From Todd.
Yeah. Awesome. So that was the bridge design capabilities that were recently released, but there's capabilities in a number of other areas too, like roadway modeling. So in terms of roadway modeling, one of the most important things we want to highlight is the ability for InfraWorks to give you feedback about your design. So in the pictures here, I wanted to stop on pictures first so that people could see it, because while you're modeling, it goes by a little bit quickly. We've created the ability for the geometry, in this case the selected roadway centerline, to change color based on how well it does or doesn't conform to some of the design standards. That way you have direct access to how well your model conforms to the standards that you're using while you're designing, not afterwards and not in some separate place. And this is a quick video that shows what it looks like. I think Eric will recognize this one. So this is a roadway in InfraWorks that's selected. One of the things that you'll see are station labels on the selected roadway. They're shown at key geometry points and at 50-meter or 50-foot increments. Those station labels adjust depending on how you're looking at the model, depending on what your perspective is. And what's happening here is what we're showing is editing the radius of the curve that's basically in the middle of the screen and making it too small. And when we do make it too small, it turns yellow. It's a warning. And you also see some information in the stat that tells you the radius is too small, and it gives you some suggestions on how to change that, basically make the radius bigger. And when the radius conforms to the standards, it changes from yellow, I think, to green to let you know that it's okay. And we're working on incorporating more feedback like this so you get real-time feedback while you're designing. This is a relatively simple example, but you can imagine this kind of thing applying to other pieces of the design. Like if we had a more complicated spiral here, it could give you feedback about that. We can incorporate some of these things into bridge design, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The third thing I'm going to talk about, which is also very important to roadway design, particularly in terms of getting that engineering feedback out of the model, are material quantities. So throughout the course of 2016, we focused on extracting earthwork quantities out of the model and reporting those quantities to the user so they can make design decisions. We've extended that, and now there are more quantities that are available on that panel. In this case, you're seeing road materials of the components used, so things like the amount of pavement that's needed to construct the particular roadway that you've laid out. We've also gone ahead and created the ability for InfraWorks to understand the 3D models that are alongside your roadway design. So things like lights, guardrails, things that InfraWorks might consider to be a road decoration. Those are now on the quantities panel as well. Now this is great because it gives you the ability to see lots of things about your roadway design. The flip side is that you're going to see lots of things about your roadway design. So potentially this list of quantities could be really long. So the second thing the team worked on was the ability to customize this panel so you can see the quantities for only the things that you want. That way the panel doesn't become incredibly long. So this is the same roadway that we were looking at just a minute ago. But now what we're going to do is look at the quantities for that road. And that selected road has a bridge, it has some components like a lane and a shoulder, it's got a jersey barrier at some point that it's accounting for. And there are some other 3D models like street lamps. I think it counts 4 street lamps. That's a really limited list, but if you wanted to see the full range of things that you might be able to see, like the drainage components, all of the things that go along with the roadway model, like additional components, you can turn on and off the things that you want to see, so you can have a quantities report that reflects exactly what you want. Like maybe you just want to see the drainage stuff and nothing else, or just the bridge stuff and nothing else. And you can export that configured or that curated quantities display to a report, which in this case is a CSV file that was shown in Excel. And the last couple things I'm going to talk about relate to visualization or usability enhancements. And the first one are usability enhancements. This one seems pretty small, but this is an important one to address. We made some of the labels, we think, easier to read on disabled fields. So I just used a screenshot to show this because I think it's the clearest way to do it. When a field was disabled or not editable, before on the left it would be screen back, it would be kind of a light gray color. That's a little bit hard to read and a little bit hard to pick out, so we made the label a little bit bolder and we changed the details about that label. We made them italicized to make them stand out a little bit more. The other usability enhancement relates to roadside grading. So we made some improvements to roadside grading in the January release, which is 2017.3, that allowed you to create grading zones. So you could specify specific criteria for a limit station-to-station limit on one side of the road or another, and that's what's shown here. What we did is we changed the grip to make it a lot easier to control and manipulate. So you have a lot more, it's a lot easier to pick the limit of one grading area versus another and change it around a little bit. I think the grip used to be a lot smaller and a little bit harder to find before. So we improved that too. And this last thing might be most important to those of you that said you were using InfraWorks for visualization. If you go to the view settings, which is a relatively new panel, I think we released that as well in the January release, but it might have been back in September, I'd have to check. One of the things we hear from customers who do a lot of visualization, particularly visualizations of large areas of trees, it might be a stand of trees, it might be a forest, any kind of model that has a lot of trees, often up until now can run into problems where it might perform poorly while you're panning and zooming, and it might also run into situations where it doesn't render all the trees quite right. The reason for that is that trees, I think out of all of the assets in InfraWorks, are the most complicated ones to render well. They're just complex looking in general. So what the team did is they created this notion of a simplified tree, which you see at the top. And for comparison, the realistic tree is at the bottom. A simplified tree kind of takes away the characteristics of the tree that let you identify its species, but it retains some key things like the height of the tree and the width of the tree. And what it does is it just creates a simplified view that renders much more reliably and much more quickly. So if you have a model with a lot of trees and you configure a view to use these simplified trees, you might find that the performance of the model is a little bit better. It becomes a little bit easier to work with in those cases where you're not so concerned about having a realistic view of what the trees look like in the model. So those are the highlights of the release that was just launched a couple of weeks ago. There's only been about two or 3 months between releases. So we're on this path where we're releasing more frequently throughout the year. So I guess the good news is it makes some of these presentations a little easier and shorter, I suppose, to follow. But the thing I want to leave you with is what we're working on next. So we publish the InfraWorks roadmap on the forums, and I realized that the one we published back in January was really hard to read. That image down at the bottom, it somehow gets simplified when I post it, so most people couldn't read a lot of the items in it. We're going to fix that before we post the next one for sure. But I'm using this opportunity to let this group know what will be on that roadmap when we post it. I thought giving this particular group on this audience on the webcast a sneak peek at the roadmap might be a good idea. So that's what I'm going to do. At some point in the next couple of weeks, though, I'll publish this to the forums for everyone to see. So like Eric said at the beginning, when we talk about the roadmap or things that we're working on, there's no promise this functionality will be delivered at any point in time. It's just things that we're working on next, and we want you to know what those things are. So in terms of modeling, whether that's bridge modeling or road modeling, we're focused on a couple of things. One of them is in-canvas editing. So before, in one of the videos, I showed you the station labels on the road and the way the road changed color and gave you notifications when it was out of whack. What we want to do is create more opportunities or create more ways to edit that information in Canvas as opposed to having to always edit it on the stack. If you think back to the bridge video that I just showed, a lot of the edits we made to the pier, once we brought it into the InfraWorks model to view it in real-world context, we made on the stack. We want to enable that editing to be in Canvas whenever possible as well, because we know that both mechanisms are really important to designers and useful in certain cases. So we're working on that. The second thing we're working on relates to quantities. I just showed the material quantities that we added to the quantities panel. One of the things we're working on next is being able to allow you to define an area and see only the quantities within that particular area. So it doesn't have to be all of the quantities for a selected road or group of roads. You can specify any area you want and just see the quantities within that particular zone. Continuing on with things we're working on related to modeling, we're working on some geometric layout that will allow you to do things like design on and off ramps a lot more easily. Sometimes we call this element-based layout. We're also working on adding more parametric assets to the model. So I showed you the the ability to bring in a peer created with Inventor. We'd like to extend that kind of capability so that you can create anything in Inventor. Maybe it's a street light, maybe it's a guardrail, maybe it's some kind of custom barrier that you could bring into InfraWorks with all of those dimensions and parametric relationships and do a very similar workflow that you saw with the peer. So you could bring it in, you could create variations of it by changing the size, you could modify the UI, you could modify the tooltips that appear for basically anything, not just bridge components. And the third thing, I'm saving maybe the most important and most significant thing for last in terms of the roadmap update. What we're hearing from a lot of customers from many different firms all over the world is that drones and scanning are becoming a much more realistic part of their workflows. Maybe 5 years ago it was the kind of thing that only the biggest firms did or only very specialized firms did, but it wasn't an everyday thing. And we're finding that scanning is becoming more of an everyday tool. And a lot of our civil infrastructure customers have scanning data that they want to incorporate into their civil engineering projects. So we have some really exciting work related to point clouds in InfraWorks as well as Civil 3D. Some of it's already in product. For example, you can create an InfraWorks terrain from a point cloud. You can extract features, point features from that point cloud like signs and lights and things like that. We're planning to continue extending that functionality, and we're really excited about some of the work that's going on, and that, we'll be really excited when that's ready to release to customers. So, and with that, I will turn it back over to Eric and Dave to talk about Civil 3D.
Thanks, Sarah. That was awesome. A couple of people asked about how to get their hands on the new release, which is good news. There are a couple of different ways. One is to check your Autodesk application, which should pop up a notification, or you can open it up and see the latest version available if you're already an InfraWorks customer. You can also go to manage.autodesk.com and check for the download there after you log in. Or if you're not an InfraWorks customer, I'm not sure if it's been posted yet. If not, it will be very soon. You can go to autodesk.com/InfraWorks and you can download the free trial, which will also give you the latest version. Again, we may not quite have it up there yet, but it will be definitely within the next few days. There are lots of questions. Our folks in the background are handling them, so I'm going to move over to Dave. Dave, I'm going to give you the floor. And thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Hey, Eric, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can see your screen, but I do not see a camera feed. Oh, here it comes. Gotcha.
There's a lot going on here.
I know. This is a very detailed production we've got running here.
Well, my hands are numb from answering questions, and you've seen me type. It's not a pretty thing. Okay, so, excuse me. Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining us. We're, as Dan said, exciting time. The team's been working for quite some time on this newest release. For those of you who have been involved over the past year in our validation and research activities, we greatly appreciate it. It's really, as we've said in other discussions, it's had a big impact, I think, on the overall quality of the product, both in I think the capabilities of what we've implemented, and also with the general quality that you find in the product. So the product is shipping. You'll find it both on it should show up on your desktop app, and if not, you can also find it up on manage.autodesk.com. I know there's always a little bit of a delay whether you have standalone Civil 3D, AEC Collection, or Infrastructure Design Suite, Ultimate or Premium. So those things I know there's a slight delay in those. I'm not sure if all of them are actually out right now based upon the way I can see in the system. So if they're not actually all up, if it's not up there for all of those different delivery types, it should be very, very quickly. Other thing is all of the languages are shipping. Over the last 2 releases now, I think we've had to where all of the languages ship at the same time as the English, which is really cool. A lot of work goes into making that happen. Lots of questions about availability of our extensions and country kits. Those are all in progress. We actually got a good step on those early in the project. So We are moving quite quickly with all of those. You will see in some cases that these are, ports of what we had for 2017. However, a number of them we're making, various improvements. Some significant, some are, relatively small but important. So you'll see those start to roll out in the next really couple of months, maximum, I would say. Last thing I'll say, and we're going to go through this fairly quickly, but there are a number of videos that are available demonstrating the new capabilities of the 2018 release. If you look on the ADSK infrastructure channel, or if you search up on YouTube for Civil 3D 2018, the team has made some really nice materials to help support the launch. I'm really impressed with what they've done and appreciate it. But if you haven't looked at those, that's a great way just to get a quick feel on where we are. Okay, I would categorize the improvements in 3 areas. So one of them is related to engineering efficiency. So it's funny, there was actually a question from a gentleman about how we don't have all of the relationships in place across Civil 3D, and that's true. I mean, there's still some places that we want to fill in, but that was kind of the driving theme for this release and also last, which is to extend those relationships between more objects, giving you more capability, more power. So, it's alignment offsets, it's alignments that are being connected between two different alignments being connected. It's how we can use an extracted baseline and a quarter, those types of things, really tying those all together more tightly. Also giving you additional control as you're modeling. We'll talk about some of those improvements. And then focusing on, improving the modeling of drainage and pressure pipes. So, some of these are improvements that we made during the 17 release that we've been able to now roll up into the 18 release. We also know that you guys have to deliver production drafting, right? So we've made improvements on things actually that have been in the product for a long time, but you can now create plan over plan and profile over profile sheets. And there's also some significant improvements on our ability, or your ability now to react to changes when you're generating basically section sheets. So we'll look at that. And then finally, and this again was a theme throughout, I think not all of them, but many of the questions that were coming up on the webcast here. It's really about interoperability between products. So how do we, what are we doing to improve the workflow between, Civil 3D and InfraWorks, but also between Civil 3D and 3ds Max and BIM 360, and there's work that's being done between Civil 3D and Revit and InfraWorks and Revit and so on. So it's certainly a theme throughout Autodesk. We know we have to do a better job of making it so that you can use these products in a more interactive and collaborative way. Okay, so I'm going to go through these quickly, but at a high level, here are the key things you're going to want to look for. Right? First is this whole idea of having a feature line that's going to be relative to a surface. Basically, think of it this way, right? If you go to an Autodesk University class, what you'll first see is somebody's going to create some kind of a reference surface, and then they're going to project feature lines up to that surface. And then they'll progressively refine those feature lines to build their final top surface. What we've done here is we've said, okay, we want to make it now so those feature line, the elevations of those feature lines can remain persistent to that surface. So if that surface changes, if you want to make a macro level change, you can do so, and all those feature lines will react. However, we also know that there may be a lock to an elevation, or there may be feature lines that we want to have above or below that surface as you get into kind of that refinement of those feature lines. So that's a major change here. Again, targeting all users, so land development, site, transportation folks are all going to benefit from that capability. Another one along the line of extending those relationships is we've always had the ability to create your offset alignments from a center line or from another alignment. What we've now added is not only do you have that offset horizontally, but you can now apply a vertical to it. So when you now offset that alignment, you can say, I would like to follow the design profile from that center line, and I want to offset at say a 2% slope, and then I have the ability to change that slope insert at certain station values. So if I want to now start to design, say I'm working on a subdivision road, and I want to design my edge of pavements relative to my centerline versus trying to use a quarter, I can do that very, very efficiently. And there's a number of controls that we've added. We've also just done some simplification. Simple things such as when you create the offset, I also want to automatically superimpose that onto my centerline profile. Really just trying to cut down the numbers of steps and picks and clicks that you may do for something that's a pretty typical operation. Okay, so again, that's an example of connecting those different objects in a way that we haven't had in the past. Another one would be if I want to connect two different horizontal alignments, actually horizontally and vertical. So like in the image you see on the right side of the screen, I've got my edge of pavement for my main road and that cul-de-sac road. What we can now do is add just a simple connection that's going to span the two, in this case putting in the curb return. And I have control over the radius, and I also have control over how that vertical is going to be controlled. So it's going to lock vertically to both of those alignments that it's connecting. So if one thing changes, the profile is going to update for that connection. And you can also overwrite vertically what's happening within that connection. Say you want to change things for flow, for drainage, and so on, right? So we've had the ability to do something similar when you're modeling an intersection. What this is to give you a bit more of an ad hoc approach. So really, any types of alignments that you want to now, join with some persistent connection, you can now do so very, very easily. Okay, and then the last one I'll talk about here is really being able to progressively build out a quarter using more and more of the individual strings. So one of the things that we added here was, so over the past year we added the ability to gave you better control over extracting features from a corridor, right? So I want to specifically extract, a string that's named this from station here to station there. We now have the ability for you to use that extracted feature line and define that to now be used as a baseline in that same corridor. So again, it's this idea of I can now start to progressively add more and more controls into a corridor. So rather than you working with conditional assemblies and making a gazillion different regions in a quarter, you can make it really into a very simple quarter and then extract a key string, add it as a baseline, and then build off of that. Gives you control over, maybe I want to have a different frequency control within one certain part of the corridor. Or maybe I'm adding, a good example, maybe I've got driveway curb cuts, and I don't want to have to manage all of those as different regions within the corridor. So a lot more control, but again, it's that whole theme of we're giving you more things that remain connected so that you can progressively refine and build out more and more of your different types of models, right? So transportation, site, land development, all of those different types of projects. Okay, looking then at production efficiency, so big area of focus was, so what we kind of have seen over the years is people, initially you're going to create their section view groups, right? So you're going to lay out all of your sections onto sheets just the way you want. There's generally a lot of hand drafting that has to occur on those, right? So in this case, there's a call out, a bubble. Maybe there's some text. Maybe there's some block that you can insert into that specific section. So then what happens is, okay, maybe we need to make a change. Maybe we insert a section somewhere near the beginning of that sample line, near the beginning of that roadway. What people were challenged with is okay, how do you update all of those sections and have all of that ad hoc drafting move with it? That's the introduction of this. We call it a section view drafting buffer. Basically, it's a non-plotting. Well, you can plot it if you want, but basically an area around the section view, and anything within that, any CAD entity, so hatching, blocks, text, whatever it may be, those are graphically glued into that section. So they're still their own thing. But if I insert that sample line and then update my section view group, all of that drafting is going to move with that section to its new location. So it gives you that ability to get the drafting the way you want it, and then if you have to make a change, you can then very easily, really in a pick of a button, just have everything update. Real quick, real easy. Okay. The other one that we added was on the the plan over plan and profile over profile sheet creation. This is probably the smallest UI change I think we've ever made in any feature, but it gives you a significant improvement in workflow. Now, essentially, you're just going to go into the same process that you've done when making a plan over profile sheet, and you'll see there's a couple of different options, and then we've added a couple of different sheet templates in there. So again, just as you may have made your own custom sheet layouts for plan over profile, you're going to do the exact same thing if you want to make your own for plan over plan or profile over profile. So effectively, it's the exact same process that you've used in the past, but you now have the ability to have multiple plans and multiple profiles on that production deliverable. Okay, and then the last area that I wanted to touch upon related to collaboration updates. Again, big theme of the Q&A that we've seen here, but within Civil 3D, this is kind of a work in progress, but we've added a new ribbon tab that's really focused on giving you a more streamlined ability to have that dual product workflow. All right, so in this new UI, you can launch InfraWorks, and all of the tools related to moving data back and forth between the two products are located in this one spot. What you will see over the year and beyond is this will fill out into more seamless workflows. It will expand upon those point-to-point exchange workflows. So more intelligence, more support for objects. But we also want to make it so, while I'm in Civil 3D, I may want to perform a task that's better done within InfraWorks, and we'll be able to effectively launch that operation from here, launch InfraWorks, hopefully with the correct data in place so that you can do what you want to do, and then move things back and forth. So that's really our vision for this workflow and for the UI that we've introduced here. Along the way, though, we've continued to make other improvements. So for those of you who use 3ds Max, we've improved our export to 3ds Max utility. Previously, we had a separate extension called Civil View for Civil 3D. That's no longer needed. All of that functionality is natively included in the product. We also made improvements to that workflow, one of them being just the performance of the utility, but also better control over what you're selecting, folder support, and a number of other things. There's other things that are underway, some that are actually available now. One of them not listed here is on the Revit side. They now have a similar ability to what we have, basically this ability to underlay an NWC file, kind of like the collaboration approach that we have on the AutoCAD-based product. So I can now have my Civil 3D drawing, save it as NWC, and then I can underlay that into Revit. So part of this whole coordination model approach. So again, a lot of work that we're doing here, things that you're going to see progressively over the year. Okay, and then the last area is we've got a number of improvements that were delivered over the past year. Specifically, we've got things that were in the 2017 V1 improvements release. So it's creation of property set or inclusion of property set values in our object labels, the Analyze Gravity Network tool, the Swap Pressure Part Network tool, also the Traverse Editor and Traverse Adjustment tools that were added midway. Those are fully integrated now into the product and into the UI. So exciting stuff there. As I said, other extensions or historical extensions are underway, and those will begin to roll out in the near future. Key point I want to make too, though, before I pass it back to Eric, is we look at this as an ongoing process, right? So Civil 3D 2018, yes, it's shipping, but we see this as kind of an evolving platform, and we've got a very aggressive plan over the coming year to really execute on this continuous delivery strategy. So effectively give you ongoing improvements that are done in a way that's very low on the disruption, very high on the value. A couple of things just to give you a feel for, so you know kind of what we're thinking about. On the engineering side, again, the themes of engineering, production, and collaboration. A lot of research going in now onto some of the specifics related to road rehab and resurfacing, how we optimize that, make that more efficient. Lots of discussions up on the Q&A related to what happens with the former Chameleon Labs project. That's delivery of a tool and a workflow for creation of gravity and pressure content, both for Civil and InfraWorks. So that's something that we're working quickly to get into production mode. There are a number of improvements, again, tying things together, but also just giving you improvements in both geometry, layout, and modeling. On the production side, we're looking at things related to how you create your, or really focus on, that process of projecting, adding those, blocks and points and feature lines and all those other types of things that you want to add into both sections and profiles. Try to make that a bit more consistent. Try to simplify that workflow a little bit. We're also looking at a number of improvements related to the delivery and management of standards, so styles. So, think things such as the ability to have, the ability to reference a template and leverage that, just expanding upon that. And then on the collaboration side, we're looking at things related to, as I said, just improving the workflow, simplifying the process of moving data to and from InfraWorks, Civil 3D, Revit, and other products that are out there. There's also a lot of work related to support for BIM 360, so visual fidelity, object intelligence, just building that better, and so it's more supported directly by our infrastructure workflows. And then finally, there's a lot of effort that we're putting into on making it so that we can more readily or effectively exchange data with others in the industry, right? Some of those are partners and some of those are competitors, but in reality, we know that those are products and in data formats that you guys work with in your day-to-day. We know that we need to be able to give you a way to leverage that data, whether it's bringing it into Civil, our infrastructure products, or whether it's taking from our infrastructure products back into these other data environments. So again, it's opening that up as much as possible, to try to give you that benefit of working in a really, clean way, effectively give you the ability to kind of use these products as part of a larger workflow. Okay, so those are the things that I wanted to cover. Eric, I think that leaves you just a couple of minutes, but I'll stay online and look at any questions.
Yeah, that was great, Dave. I do want to ask you one question, but before I do, I want to invite everyone here to go into the questions panel and just type in the one feature that you heard about today that sticks into your mind that you're really excited about. So just let us know that one thing that really was a highlight for you. And, I'll download, I know there are going to be tons and tons. I'll download that with a log and we'll look at it later. The one question that came up a few times, Dave, that you probably knew would come up is compatibility, backward compatibility. Can you talk about, 2018 versus 2017 and how that's going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this is a hot topic. And I've obviously followed the threads that are up on the forum and so on. So with 2018, there's basically two aspects here to consider. One is AutoCAD has a new DWG format change. So it's now a 2018 format. Okay, so you can't open the DWG natively in a prior version. We are, for Civil 3D, we have objects that are specific to our Civil model, right? Think alignment, surface, etc. Okay, our strategy going forward is to be in lockstep with AutoCAD. So for this release, we've introduced object format change. So we are now on our 2018 version of the object format. So that means you are basically that 2018, you're going to have to export it to AutoCAD prior version if you want to get that drawing graphically to show up in prior versions. Our strategy, as I said, is to remain in sync with AutoCAD. So while I can't speak to that timeline, what I can say is we don't intend to have, similar to the 2017 release where we had AutoCAD hold the format and we updated the object format. We understand that that's confusing. We understand just the disruption that that causes. So, we understand it, but we also know that for us to implement a number of the things that we know have to be implemented to make those changes, we have to go towards that. We have to actually introduce those types of disruptive changes. So we'll minimize them as best as possible, and we'll do the best we can to give you ways of moving data back and forth, whether it's LAN XML, whether it's export, and some other things that we've actually been investigating. So kind of a long answer to that question, but that I think is one that has impacted so many people. I wanted to be real clear. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. That's really appreciated. Before I let you all go, I just want to remind you one last time that we have a webcast coming up in 2 weeks, I believe, Wednesday, May 3rd. The topic will be the electric utility story, success in the use of InfraWorks for utilities projects. So definitely check that out. Whether you're into utilities projects or not, I think you'll find this really interesting and compelling as far as folks having success in their projects with InfraWorks in general. I want to thank Dan and Sarah and Dave for putting on great presentations. In the background, we had Ara, Charlie, Peter Funk, Tim Yaris. They were all answering questions, as well as Sarah. When she jumped off of her presentation, she was answering questions. I know we got well over 100 questions just scanning through all the different things that came up. So great job, team in the background, answering all those questions. We've got many more to sift through that we didn't get the chance to answer, and we will definitely do that. Thanks again to everyone who attended. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your day to hear about these exciting new product releases, and make sure you go and download them and start getting the benefits out of the new features as soon as you can. Thanks again. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next webcast.